Hi, I'm Renée Walker, a mindset mentor, speaker, and lover of all things spiritual. I believe that at our core, we are all spiritually wired for love, peace, success, and abundance. Here on the podcast, we're diving into mindset, wellness, and business, but always through a spiritual lens. Let's just say we're going deep, but we're keeping it light. So let's elevate your life from the inside out, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. So today I have I'm not even sure how to begin this introduction. And to be honest, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get through this episode without crying, but I'm going to try because I have with me Lisa Garber. And she's a personal coach, but she's been my personal coach I met Lisa over 20 years ago. And in some of the episodes that I've shared that are more personal, for those of you who come to my classes, you've heard me often speak about the fact that I do believe one of the life-changing moments for me personally was making the decision to join a life coaching group all those years ago, so 20 plus years ago. The kids were little at the time. You know, our son was toddler and daughter was more like a baby. And a mom had invited me from the play, like the nursery school that the kids went to or that our son went to. And I remember having no idea what it was about, but it sounded interesting. And honestly, at the time, I was like, oh, once a month, I think I can pull that off. And it's once a month where I get to have some time for myself. So sign me up. And that decision ended up being just the best decision because it was really the beginning of finding myself. So there you go. I knew I was going to cry as we started this. And this beautiful soul that I'm about to introduce you to, Lisa, was our coach. And her and I mean, we started out in a coaching relationship for many years. I learned so much from her. And then I've had the privilege of calling her a friend for so many years again. And it's just been, she's sort of that person that, you know, when good things happen, I call, but also in those moments where I feel like I need that person, and she's been that person for me to guide me and to just listen. She's the best listener because clearly I'm not stalking. I'm talking nonstop. So all that
Yes, I'm
to
here.
say, welcome, Lisa.
I'm here. I'm really here. Thanks for having
Okay.
me, Renee. Thank you. As you were talking, I was wondering, how did it switch from that coaching, professional coaching, to such a deep friendship? I don't even know how it happened. It's magical, I guess.
I'm not sure. No, actually, I do know how it happened was that so after a few years of being in or doing the coaching, I remember having just this like really strong calling towards sharing this work with other women because it felt so transformational for me personally. And I still remember that moment. I was like on the treadmill and I felt like just touched and knowing that, okay, I need to share this with more women. I asked you, and then we had another one of our dear friends who was part of the coaching. I remember bringing it to everyone, and then there were the three of us that decided to create this company. It was called Mothers on Fire. And through that process of bringing it, I think is where like our
Yeah.
friendship, like the friendship sort of began, or the relationship that we had sort of like shifted.
Yeah. I'm looking for the book.
And
Oh,
I,
here it is.
yeah, Lisa is, if you're listening to this, you're not seeing her, but if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the lovely book here because in the process of Mothers on Fire, the company, we ended up publishing a book that Lisa wrote, Becoming a Mother on Fire, How to Be a Mom Without Losing Yourself.
It's a good book.
And it was such an incredible, it's actually still available on Amazon. You can still order it.
I think so.
Yeah, it was such an incredible ride, I would say. So we did that for a number of years, and that's sort of where the relationship shifted.
Yeah,
That's
that's
my
right.
memory of
Thank
it.
you. It's a good memory.
Now, Lisa, there is so many different topics that we could, and you and I have conversations regularly where we'll talk for over an hour, and every time we're like, oh, we should have just recorded this because it we sort of end up talking about
Because it was
life
brilliant.
and so many different, we think it was brilliant, who knows if it was. Who knows if it was? We'll find
Yeah.
out after this. So there's so many different ways we can go. And one of the things that I know that you do speak of a lot is the power of decision. And that is something I know that I've learned from you is just when you make a decision, you make a decision. Like you really bring yourself to it. I'm not sure that I know anyone else quite like you in the sense of you, it's a decision and it's happened. And there's no, you sort of have this ability. I don't know if it's an ability, but you have this way of being able to like sort of shut everything off and just to really kind of tune into it. You'll change that decision if it doesn't serve you, but there is something really, I've learned so much from you when it comes to making decisions. So let's start by maybe like how does that fit in for you and why do you believe it's so important to focus on the decisions we make?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you for noticing that about me. It's good to get feedback. Well, it wasn't always that way. And so the first really, well, it's true I've made a lot of decisions in my life, but the kind that we're talking about is the kind that you commit 100% to. And therefore, it's that whole idea of I'm all in.
Mhm.
And the all in, the one that was the most profound for me came, believe it or not, after reading Tony Robbins. So his Giant Within book, 100 years ago, the first chapter, I think, is about decisions. And I remember reading it and thinking it made a lot of sense to me that that decisions were important. And then I read another book, I believe it was Conscious Loving by Gay Hendricks, where I think it's him, or it could be the other Hendricks, Harville, that wrote about you have to shut the back door if you go into marriage counseling. In other
Mhm.
words, there's no way. You have to shut the idea that, well, if this doesn't work, we'll just break up. You have to say, no, we're doing this. There is no way out. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, wow, those are powerful. And then I, I wasn't coaching at the time. I was still a musician, and I was relatively successful. I mean, I was making a living. That is successful as a musician. But I decided to quit school, sort of quit that and go back to school. And I had to make a decision before school started because there were people around me who weren't sure that was a very good idea. I was a high school dropout, I didn't do very well in high school even, right? So I barely made it through grade 10. And some people were in doubt about my decision. So I thought, well, I have to go all in. So what does that mean? It means that I will do whatever it takes to be successful at university and complete this. And that's the decision that I made. And I made that based on those two people, or three, and that decisions were powerful. And so that decision absolutely changed me in that I had closed the back door. You know, they have that joke, oh, shut the front door. No, shut the back door, right? No way out of here. This is it. I am here. So even that means that when things go wrong or difficult, and believe me, university at 33 years of age, as a high school dropout who had never written an essay and barely did any homework her whole life, it was difficult. I've never worked so hard. And there were times when I wanted to give up, but not really, because I had made the decision. And so it honestly never crossed my mind. I might have felt despondent and I might have felt very tired, but it never crossed my mind, not once, not to quit. And you know, and you're right, I do have that same attitude about working out. I don't even think about it. I made a decision a long time ago. If I wanted to have a healthy, happy life, I needed to work out. Not to mention the fact that I enjoy it. Well, I found something I enjoy. But even when I didn't enjoy it, I didn't even think not to go. That's what these kinds of decisions are. The back door is absolutely shut. You don't even consider an alternative. Yes, there are days when I don't go, but then I get up and go for a walk, right? So it's, very powerful.
So it's like there's no other, like you don't leave yourself other options.
No, I do not.
The decision is made and that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's what they mean when people get married.
Mhm.
Right? I think
Mhm.
that's what the marriage vows are for, because
Yeah.
it's just too easy to go, oh, this is harder than I thought. I'm getting out of here. Just too easy. So
Mhm.
yes, it is. It's that kind of commitment. Yeah.
Okay, so you started with something, and we're going to have to go back to this whole story of yours because you've led one of the most interesting lives. And it's funny because our daughter, who has known you since she was a baby, recently I think it was like at my podcast launch, you and her were together hanging out, and I guess you shared some parts of your lives that she didn't know about. And so the next day we're out for a walk and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Lisa's like one of the coolest people I know." And I remember texting you that because I'm like, that is like one of the greatest compliments coming from a young 20-year-old.
Oh my
But
gosh,
you
such a compliment.
really are cool. You have lived so much life. So you mentioned that you you dropped out of high school.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit more of what that journey is, because one of the things that I feel like it's important for the listeners to know as well is that you were one of the very first life coaches in Canada. So like right now there's like so many coaches out there. But back in the day, there were not. You were one of the few ones, and you transitioned to coaching from a career like you were in psychotherapy before. So you made that transition from therapy to coaching. So we'll get to that. But what was the journey from like quitting high school to making that powerful decision to now go back to school when you were 33? Something tells me there was a lot that happened in those years.
Yes, so keeping in mind too that as cool as I may look, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have no idea. I got a text from my great niece who's 15, right? And I get a text from her because I sent her something about music, and I get a text back from her, and I go, I must be okay. I get a text from my 15-year-old. So I appreciate it. I really do. The the what started the ball rolling though was trauma. which honestly happens for a lot of people. Something happens that creates something in your life. And in this case, my parents divorced. My mother moved me out of the town that I grew up in. So now I'm 14 years old and I'm in Toronto and I'm lost and really lost. And my mother's of no help. And my father's of no help. And my two brothers have managed to somehow disappear, even though they were also both living in Toronto. And it was very difficult. So those 2 years that I was in school, I was barely keeping my head afloat. I was depressed. Now, when I look back, I realize I was depressed. So when I chose to quit, it was more like, if I keep going the way I'm going, I'm not going to survive this in a healthy way. So for me, it was like, get out, just get out. So I did. And that was the right decision, honestly, even though people thought I was nuts. It was the right decision. So at 16, I then went, I think I had a job already. I was working as a server at a folk club, and I was working as these were nighttime gigs, right? So I could go to school and I could work in the evening, and then I was working as a person who takes tickets at a theater. And so I had a job already. So I found somebody from the club who said, yeah, you can live with me. So we literally lived on a couch that folded down, and she and I slept on this for a little while until we moved into a famous place called Rushdale. And so I went out on my own. And while I was working, though, at that club, I was asked to sing a few times. And I'd get up on that stage, and somebody else at the time was playing the guitar for me because I didn't know how. And I would sing, and I got a lot of very positive response. And so it wasn't long after that a guitar player, asked me to join the band. So at 17, I joined a band. And then I started singing in clubs. And I was underage. I'd never been in a club that sold liquor. And I had never actually drunk liquor. I know that sounds odd, but it just hadn't come. Those were the days when you smoked pot. You and I guess those days are back. But in those days, that's what you did. And I did a little of that. Not much. And then I just started in a band. And then I stayed in a band in one form or another for 16 years. I learned to play the guitar. I had a record contract. I put out a record here and there. I sang backup for people. I performed. I wrote songs. I had a recording publishing deal. I lived in New York for a while. I lived in LA for a while. And I was just following that impulse to be a musician and to sing. Yeah. And then one day I'd had enough. I just had enough. And I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, well, I'll give myself one more year and see what I feel like at the end of that year. And so I spent a good year. I played a lot of clubs. I opened for some big acts. I did some large venues, 10,000 person, venue. I opened for a big name there. And at the end of that, it was a New Year's Eve. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And it came to me very clearly. 3 things. I need to go back to Toronto. I was in New York at the time. I need to go back to Toronto. I need to go to the dentist. It had been about 10 years since I could afford a dentist. I need to get a job, and I need to go back to school. Yeah, and so that was it. It just came to me. I had to do those things, and so guess what? I just did them.
Okay. Would you say, though, that we talked about like that decision that you made to go back to school and to be successful in school, but prior to that was obviously a decision to let go of
Yeah,
the life that you had and also the dream. Like I would imagine that as you were singing and you had your singing career for 16 years and you were experiencing success, and I mean, you were like, when you left, I remember, I believe that you said that you were in the middle of like a contract, or like there were
yeah,
things sort of like unfolding. There were positive things happening in your singing career. So there had to be like that decision also to leave that
yeah.
and to let go of a dream that I would imagine at one point you had. So I guess the question is around, and you and I have maybe had some of these conversations before, but I feel like it's maybe difficult to articulate. But it's like the loss. Was there any? How was the letting go process for you? Is that something
It
that
was pretty
felt
easy.
it was pretty easy?
Well,
Okay.
because I gave myself a year, right? I didn't, when I had the
Yeah.
first idea of letting go, it wasn't, okay, I'm letting go tomorrow. It was, okay, let's take a year. Let's do what are doing, keep an eye open, keep our heart open, see what happens in that year. And if I still feel the same way in a year, then we'll go.
Hmm.
So in
Hmm.
a way, that was part of it, right? I didn't do it. It was well thought through.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was miserably unhappy.
Hmm.
And so there was the dream had long died. All
Okay.
those years, the record contracts, the manager who moves me from New York, where I was blissfully happy living, moves me to New York to LA and never shows up at my door, and I never see him again.
Hmm.
Disappears, right? The people, mostly men, trying to make me into, the chick singer. I never was a chick singer, but they all want, and there was a certain expectation in the way I was treated. It wasn't. I'm sure it's similar. I don't think the world has changed that much, honestly, I'm afraid to say, except that women make more money. Thank you, Taylor Swift and Shania Twain. They
Hmm.
can make a lot of money, and that was not happening back then. But yeah, I was miserably unhappy, and there was no dream. But here's the thing: is that I'm not sure that was meant to be my dream anyway.
Yeah.
And so part of these decisions, are driven. Oh, well, let me just say this: all this time that I'm in New York and LA and here, those 16 years, I am working on myself. I'm reading personal growth books. I am one of the three people that were that was in Louise Hay's first workshop. There were three of us in the basement of a church in Los Angeles.
That's
You
just
know,
amazing. You, Louise Hay, and two other women.
two other women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, she
And
was
you
so
also, I
lovely.
know Marianne Williamson. You
And
said
Marianne
you
Williamson.
knew
Yeah.
her when she was beginning.
Also in the basement of the same church. It was
Yeah.
the Church of Religious Study, Church of Religious Science. It's probably still there.
Hmm.
New Thought Movement Church had all these people in their basements doing these workshops before they were famous, and that's how they became good at what they did. I was going to those. I was reading those books. I was meditating. I was a big meditator. 3 hours in the evening kind of big meditator. I was really working hard. So when that voice came and said, I think you're done, I listened to it.
Yeah. So the connection that you had built in terms of like coming back to yourself and feeling this strong connection with who you were was there. So there wasn't like the questioning piece, because that is the thing. It's like for especially something like being a musician where there's so much of it is based on external validation, and that whole I can't even imagine how that was playing out. But for many people, it would be difficult to let go of that. But it sounds like for you, it really was like, I would call that a download, an intuitive download, where it was just like, okay, this is clear. This is what I need to do.
Yeah.
But you, beyond that, also had that knowing and trusting in yourself.
Yeah, lucky for
Go
me,
for it.
I called it the voice of God, right? For me, it
Hmm.
was God and Guru were guiding me. And it was very clear. That has happened a few times in my life, and it's just very clear when that voice is not your voice. Sounds
Hmm.
like you, but it isn't. Doesn't feel like you. It feels like something very different, and
Hmm.
that that that's what it was. Yeah.
So this podcast is called Spiritually Wired, so we are allowed to go all spiritual. Your let's go into your meditation practice, because you have, like, as you said, you were meditating lots even then, and today you still have a very strong, consistent, powerful meditation practice. So what has that looked like for you? Has that evolved, shifted? What does it bring to you?
Okay, now you can now I can cry, right? Oh, well, ever since I was a child, I believed in, I had a tendency to uh, connect with something that was not material. And so, for instance, I broke my arm when I was about 10, my wrist, and they couldn't set it. So I had to come home from the hospital and wait till from like 12 in the afternoon till like 6 o'clock at night. And then I went back to the hospital where they had an operation because it was so severely broken. So I'm lying in bed with a wrap on my arm, unable to drink any water or eat any food because I have to go under. And I am in pain, like it's unbelievable, the pain that I'm experiencing. So I'm lying in bed whimpering, literally whimpering, when that voice said, "Go into the pain." And I closed my eyes and I imagined myself literally consciously going into the pain as opposed to fighting it, which was, of course, what I was doing, trying not to feel it, right? I went right in to feel it, right into the middle of that pain and felt it like unbelievable. And as I was in the middle of that pain, feeling it, it was like something kind of cracked open my body, and this it's sort of like I literally heard like a choo, and this it just spread all over me, and then I could feel the pain, but it didn't hurt anymore.
Mm.
And I laid like that in that state for probably 3 hours. Now, what was that state? I think that was a meditative state. I think I was in an altered state of consciousness.
Mhm.
And I never forgot that. I was 10, but I never forgot it. And so I have had that inclination, right, my whole life. So my main, though, talk about making decisions, I had a bad experience with a manager, a different one, who threatened to have me killed. And I was in Los
Oh.
Angeles at the time, yeah, and my manager was in New York, and I didn't sign something he wanted me to sign, and he was really angry. And I said to my friend at the time, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, come out and stay with me. So she had a place in Malibu. So here I am at the lowest point that I can think of, staying in an apartment overlooking the water on the beach of Malibu. And I remember thinking, huh, this is pretty good for someone who's just been threatened to have their life extinguished. And I remember thinking how funny that was, that was where I ended up. And in the meantime, one night I was kind of bored and I thought, I'm just going to go for a drive. And I went for a drive. I got in the car and I started driving south, which means that the ocean is on my right and you can just see there's no other lanes of traffic there. So you just see the beautiful coast of California, which is so spectacular. And I'm driving and I'm just driving and I just ended up in Santa Monica, and then I drove down here, and then I'm in Hollywood, and I turned left, and all of a sudden I was at this big bookstore and I thought, oh, I guess I'll go get a book. So I drove in and I was parked and I'm walking around. I thought, gee, I wonder what book I'll get. And I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the other, and I ended up in the back of the place, which was all children's books. And I thought, oh, what am I doing in here? I turned around, and on one of these metal spinny things where they put books in so the cover actually faces out, I see this face staring at me. And I went, who is that? And it was Autobiography of a Yogi with Paramahansa Yogananda's face on the front. And I went,
Mhm.
I'm going to get this book. And I thought later, oh, the guru put it there for me, right? There it was, just boom, took it. Then I went back to the beach at Malibu and read that book right through and said, I'm going to follow this person, but I need a year to sort of get my life organized before I do it. It's funny, huh? There's two things that happen.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I came back to New York. I shifted here, I shifted there. I moved back to Toronto. No, I was in New York that whole year. And then about close to a year, I walked into the Yogananda Center there and picked up the form to fill out to get the lessons, and that was the beginning. And I have been a Yogananda student my whole life, and I wish I were better at it. I went through, when I lived in LA, tremendously long. I mean, I just hardly knew anybody, so I could sit in my room for 3 hours and meditate, and it didn't really. I just can't do that now. I can't find 3 hours. I could go to the center now, and they're starting to have longer meditations because Christmas is coming, so I can get some longer meditations in there. But yeah, I'm a follower, and I'm a disciple. I have a guru. How about that?
So for maybe listeners who are not familiar with Yogananda, what is it that for you really drew you specifically to his form of meditation, to his style of teaching, his way of being?
Truthfully, there's much about some of that which I'm not attracted to. He's remarkably affluent. What does it mean to talk a lot? Avuncular? When he writes like I think a lot of people from India are like that. They have this beautiful cadence, and they're just flowery and big, and he writes like that, and all of his lessons are like that, right? So sometimes I'm like, oh goodness, I can't, it's hard to get through some of the lessons. So it isn't about that. It isn't about. It is about the fact that some reason, somehow, somewhere, I am meant to be his disciple. There's no other. There's no other way to explain it. I mean, I didn't even understand what all that meant to have a guru. I really didn't. I do now, and and I I guess I love yoga philosophy, and I love Eastern things, and if there's such a thing as previous lives, then I had them, and that Yogananda was involved. I would suspect. I would suspect. Because there's no other explanation. Like, nobody else in my family has a guru. And people love Deepak Chopra. We do love him, but he's not a guru, right? So it's, yeah.
So, what makes the difference between a teacher and a guru?
Oh, guru is self-realized. God has God consciousness. I'm not sure Deepak has that. I love him. I just don't get the sense that he's. I mean, his meditation is fantastic. I love all of that. It's just not a guru. He's a
Yeah,
teacher.
there's not many gurus per se
No, there aren't. I mean, I think
that
they're out
are, yeah,
there.
yeah.
I don't know them though
They're more
because
like an enlightened soul.
he's an enlightened soul. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yogananda was absolutely, without a doubt, in my mind, an enlightened. You see it in the picture
yeah.
on the cover of that book.
No,
Those
I
eyes are
mean,
not.
I ask because I think, I'm sure people are curious. And I know that for me, I've not connected with specifically a guru, but I've known of your connection and how powerful it has been for you it's sort of like the way, what comes to me is it's almost like Yogananda has been like a gateway to God in some ways, where
Yeah.
he's touched, and then that sort of through osmosis, you sort of like feel that same presence and that same connection through him. Although I know you've also experienced it without.
With drugs.
That's part two of our
That's another
podcast.
story. But that's the role of the guru is to bring the student to God. That is the role of the guru.
Mhm.
And that's what he does. That's his whole job. And I took it very seriously when I made that commitment to be the disciple. That
Because
was
you
his
made a
job.
decision to be his a disciple.
You got it, girl.
It does come
You
back
brought it
to
right
that
back.
power. It does come back to that powerful, like, boy, yeah, like when you say you make a decision, you're like, you don't mess around. Like, that's what I meant
Wow.
in the
I'm
beginning.
impressed by
That's what I was
myself.
trying to convey, but it's like, yeah, no, you're all in, as you
I'm
mentioned.
leaving this session feeling very good about myself.
But I love how also in those big decisions, you also had the awareness of giving yourself the time and space that you needed in order to, maybe it's the word is prepare yourself, or just come to that space of like, okay, now I'm open. So it's like
Yeah.
recognizing that for some reason you were feeling called towards something, whether it's like leaving New York, coming back to Toronto, going to school. So there's a calling towards that, a calling towards Yogananda, yet at the same time, you knew, okay, this is where I am today. And now, what do I need in order to bring myself to a space where I can let go of what I know so that I can fully embrace this decision that I feel like really called towards.
Yeah.
So that is something that I'm really receiving, because I tend to also be an all or nothing person,
Mm,
which you've been coaching me on for many years. But there is a tendency to like want to go all in now. I wouldn't say that I'm patient. And so
mm,
maybe patience is the quality that you have in being able to recognize that I'm going here and it doesn't have to be now either. So
mhm.
that I'm receiving that, and hopefully also people that are listening to this episode can also receive that. That sometimes it's like we can come to a decision, we can receive that sort of like download or intuitive nudge or whatever you want to call it, but then also realize that it doesn't have to be in this moment, that you get to give yourself the time and space you need in order to
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yeah, because you see sometimes that kind of download has to break a lot of things if you're going to make it happen. And I I don't want to break things, right? I want to naturally, organically transition to things. And that, right? So if I had said, okay, this is what I'm going to do right now, I would have had to break a lot of things that were happening in my life at that moment. And I wasn't prepared to do that. I didn't want to do that. So little by little, right? I organically made decisions along the choices that I was making throughout that year, so that when the big decision to follow Yogananda happened, I had already cleared the way. It was nothing broke. Nobody got hurt in the making of the film
That you know of.
that I know of. Yeah.
Okay, so you make this big decision to leave sort of the life that you had and to now go back to school at 33, and which clearly required also finishing your high school credits and
No,
then,
I didn't have to.
oh,
I didn't
okay.
have to do that. They had this thing at University of Toronto called mature student. I laugh every time I think of it. The mature student. And so we went. I went with a bunch of people, all of us high school dropouts. We got to go and do a class for about 6 months, and it was you could pick either science or literature or English or math, or you had like choices you could pick. I picked English because, right, clearly through all those years I read a lot. And it was like a kind of more like a high school class, I think, but we had to write
Mhm.
an essay and we had to pass a test. And if we got B on that in that course, we could be admitted to the University of Toronto in their part-time student program. And I got an A, I think, actually. And there I
There you
was.
go.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
And then so then you go to university, and not only do you get a degree, but you're a overachiever and you decide, I'm going to do a
Yeah.
master's
But wait, oh,
in,
that was one of the decisions. So let me tell
mm,
you that story quickly, which is that, also being in university, I went went to university with for one thing in mind, to find myself. That was my goal. My reason why was to find myself, because if I'm not a musician, who am I? So I went to the university to find myself. So I went to different classes, and I ended up in religious studies and religious studies and psychology. I ended up with a double major. And so the year that I was done, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I thought, should I go back to music? Do I do this? What do I do? I had no clue. And so I guess this is how I operate. I said, well, you know what? I'll give myself a year.
Okay,
I'll give
I
myself a
feel like
year.
that's the title of your next book. Give yourself a
Give yourself a year. And just, don't even worry about it. This is part of the decision making that you and I have talked about, where I literally let it go. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't figure it out, because I'd been trying and trying to figure it out. And I went, clearly I don't know. Let's just let it go, and let's spend a year not worry about it. And so I had a job. They hired me full time, and that's all I did. I just went to work like a regular person, 9 to 5. That was unbelievable. And it's the first time I'd ever really done that. And then I was living, and I was dating, and I was singing my own little ways, and I was just living my life. When one day I'm walking down Bloor Street. It is noisy, really noisy at Yonge and Bloor, and I got a voice. And the voice said, go to the Ontario Institute in the Studies of Education and get a master's degree. And I was this person was talking, and I went, okay. Sort of like, oh, okay. And sure enough, I went and I applied, and I got in, and I had the best time. The best time. Yeah.
Okay, and what I learned recently that you shared with me was that you did your thesis. So I was going to transition us to, it's like the decision making, which is such an important part of this whole process, giving yourself the time and space. But then the other key thing, so no, I'd say the key things you're bringing up is like first tuning in and listening to that inner voice, that calling, and then giving yourself some time and space to kind of figure things out in your human form, in your human life. And then make that powerful decision. But it's the surrendering piece, right?
Yeah.
The letting
Yeah.
go, which you just shared so beautifully, the in the moments where we can let go of trying to figure it all out, and to just simply give ourselves the time to be and to see what shows up is usually when we receive those moments of clarity. But you recently shared with me that you actually did your thesis on
Spiritual
surrender.
surrender.
Spiritual surrender, which again, like this was a number of years ago. You are someone who does not look your age. Everyone thinks you're much younger, but you do have lovely experience. So this was a while ago, when like surrendering now, I mean, it's a buzzword. We all talk about it. So you must find it so funny that it's like all these words that, back then, not a lot of people were talking about spiritual surrender at the time. So
Were they
what
not?
yeah, I don't think so.
Well,
Or
the
maybe.
books I was reading were, I think. Yeah, it was, well, spiritual surrender. You can see from the stories I've told you already that it's something that I do, even though I wasn't conscious I was doing it. So I'm going into the pain in my broken arm means I'm not resisting, I'm surrendering, right? And I get a calling to follow a guru, and I am not resisting that. I surrendered to it. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. Just give me some time. And so in this case, I don't know what I'm going to do. It was, okay, I'm just going to let it go and see what shows up. I guess I trust. And so, yeah, it's funny because I mean, I I probably couldn't write that paper now because the way that the school system has changed and everything has changed, even at Oasis where I was, I was probably there at the most amazing time with a whole lot of hippies who were teachers. So they were, they loved what I wrote about. I wrote a paper about counseling as love. The whole paper is about all, you can have all the techniques you want, but really it comes down to loving your client. And if you can love your client, they will heal in front of you. It's just amazing how that works. So, yeah, it was a really fun thing to write, and and I just spend my life now still trying to surrender. I mean, that is, that to me is the pathway to a higher consciousness, and it is hard. I mean, I really find it hard. It's, I start doing Instagram stories, posts, and I am so caught up in what am I going to write about and how am I going to, it's like I find it really difficult. I really do. And yet it's all I want to do. It's all I really care about, really. Only I don't, because then I start caring about all this stuff that I'm not sure why I care about it. So yeah, it was it was a beautiful experience writing that paper.
It's interesting because I'm listening to you and it's almost like in some ways it can feel easier to surrender with the big things in life, but more challenging to surrender in the small moments.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm just sort of making this connection here as we're having the conversation. So maybe I'll change my mind
No,
after.
I love
But
that.
I feel it's like in the big things in life, those big decisions, those big moments, you can be like, okay, you know what? I don't have the answers for this, and it's not for me to figure out. And this is where you can be intentional with letting go and with surrendering the outcome to the universe, trusting that you'll find the answers. But as you just said that with the stories, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting how it's in the daily moments that we get caught up
Yeah.
more trying to figure it out. And so when we can just remember to stay in that space of surrender, not only for the big, big moments, but also in those like small daily
Yeah.
actions that we take, how much more peace would we experience if we could get to
So
that?
much more peace. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know that we mentioned Yogananda has been a guru, but you've also been a big follower or reader of The Untethered Soul as well. So
Yeah.
you, again, talk about going all in.
I
You've read
know,
that
I
book
know, I
how many
know.
times?
I
How
know.
many
But you
times
know
have you
that
read?
when I read the Surrender Experiment, Yogananda walks into that book.
Hmm.
Do you
Hmm.
remember that? So I'm sitting there, being a fan of Michael Singer, having read The Untethered Soul at that time, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then
Hmm.
I think, oh, I'm going to read this book, and all of a sudden Yogananda walks in. I went, oh, for heaven's sakes!
Of course. I bring it up because one of the things that Michael Singer I find does such a good job of, like when you were talking about, and I love this and I'm keeping this like with me, the whole idea of surrendering being just letting go of resistance. So when you're noticing that resistance, and I find like Michael Singer does a good job in that book of like, okay, how do you let go of resistance? I mean, first you notice it. And
Yeah,
then it's like, all you can do is take that deep breath, relax those shoulders, and allow for it to move through you. So, just like that experience when you were 10 years old and really letting yourself go into the pain, it was you like moving through
yeah,
that pain. And so whether it's grief or pain or resistance, and I know that you've used tapping as a way to like move through grief and pain in your life. So that is another, just a beautiful way in which you are able to live,
yeah,
right? From that place of surrender, but also it's a courage. It requires courage to be like, okay, I'm going to be with this and it's going to be hard, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, and I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
Yet I know and I trust and I surrender that in it is where I will receive the relief.
Yes, that's beautifully put. I have courage. I don't always have trust.
Hmm.
I work on trust. So I
Yeah.
look out the window at the trees and the birds and the lake, and the sun comes up every day. And I think about those days of my life when miracles happened, and they happen all the time. And I work very hard to remember I can trust. That's that's a challenge for me.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that, because I feel that we can all so easily say, oh, trust, trust, trust. But trust is a muscle, right? Trust is something that you build. Trust is something that is required in so many moments. It's not like this one thing and like, oh, I trust that everything is unfolding for me. There's more to it. And so thank you for saying that, because I think sometimes, and I can be guilty of that, where I can use the word in a way where it's like, yes, it's true. It requires constant a commitment to trusting that you can continuously come back to.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I agree. And you said the word commitment. I just want to say that, decisions are part of it, but it's the second half of the decision, which is the commitment to the decision, that makes all the difference. So I didn't, it's like what they say. Some of the teachers have often said, you plant the tree, you plant the seed, you can't, and then you leave it. You can't keep digging the seed out and looking to see if it's growing. Right? That's not going to work. The seed's not going to grow. And so the commitment, the decision is I've planted the seed, and the commitment is I'm going to stay here and let it grow, right? And I'm not going to bother it, and I'm not going to, so you just have to, like I'm going to do everything in my power. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be successful at university. I'm
Mhm.
not, right, is the commitment part of that decision.
Yeah, and that added piece of patience that we talked about that you have that I'm not so good at. But like
Yeah,
the
how about that?
patience piece too, it's like being like you can't force it to grow. You can't force the seed to bloom. You have to, you know, love it and do what, give it what it needs, and also give it the time and space it needs to be able to bloom. You can't force it into it, which so many of us
You do that?
get caught up in, like, yeah, like wanting to see things happen right away. And we're
Yeah.
even more and more in our society, we're just so used to this immediate
Yeah.
gratification, right? We're used to like getting information that we need right away and not having to wait for much yet.
Hmm.
With all of this, right? With our dreams, our goals, those big decisions that we make, there
That's such a
is
good
an
point.
element of time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe it is an age difference. So, a cultural, the, how I grew up compared to how you grew up. Uh, did
Hmm.
not grow up in an instant gratification culture ever.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'm in it now, and I
Yeah.
certainly get caught up in it. Yeah, that patience. Never thought of that before. I mean,
Hmm.
in some sense, that's the trust, right? The trust that life takes care of itself. Nature
Yeah.
is here. It will do what it's meant to do. But yeah, curious. Patience. I never thought of myself as a patient person.
So
Certainly
we
not at
could
dinner.
go on so long. I'm looking at the time, and I have a feeling that you'll be back. These are my favorite conversations where we can just explore life and see where it goes. So our episode went in a different direction, but I know and trust that it's where it
Yeah.
needed to go. I am in so much appreciation for you and gratitude. I do love to end the podcast by asking what spirituality means to you.
Spirituality itself means to me the difference between a material plane, right? Spirituality itself means learning to connect with and recognize and open to a different level of living. That's what spirituality as the word means to me. And what it means to me personally is, the purpose of my life.
Beautifully said.
That
Thank
and
you.
Instagram.
Instagram stories. So speaking of Instagram, where can people find you, Lisa?
Oh, well, it depends on what I'm releasing and what decisions I've made. But yeah, I'm on Instagram in a way that I've never been before. So I do post 3 times a week. I really do. And so I think it's at Lisa Garber Coaching.
Coaching. Yes,
And
Lisa
then I
Garber
do have a
Coaching. And
blog.
what's your website?
My website is lisagarber.com, but that I really do write a lot of blogs, and some of them are very
And you are such an amazing writer. I love your writing. So we're going to link to all of the different ways in which you can connect with Lisa. Lisa is an incredible coach, both for I know you do a lot of even corporate type of coaching, personal coaching, but then also for any coaches who are listening to this, Lisa is just, she's been there. She knows exactly how to support other coaches. And you also are part of a certification where you certify life coaches as
yeah.
well. So there are many ways in which you can receive some of the incredible wisdom that Lisa shares.
And the
So
love,
thank you
the love.
very, yes, your love. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being you and for being by my side for so many years. I feel blessed. And yeah, thank you. And I'm going to remind all of our listeners that you are spiritually wired for connection, for love, for ease, for peace, for surrender. And I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Wired. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. It really makes a big difference for the podcast. And if you're ready to dive deeper and join a soul-led community, come be a part of the Spiritually Wired membership. With weekly life lessons and a rich library of recorded classes, it's designed to support you every step of the way on your spiritual journey. We currently have a special offer where you can receive your first month for half the price. You can find a link in the show notes or come check it out at reneewalkerwellness.com. Until next time, remember to take some deep breaths. Remember that you are spiritually wired.